If you're conservative and tired of so-called woke policies, then one country wants to welcome you. There's a new residence permit available if you agree to certain anti-woke policies. I'm going to tell you about it. And I'm also going to tell you why there's more to this than may meet the eye. This is going to be a little controversial. Russia is rolling out its new so-called anti-woke residence permit. Our own Nomad Capitalist R&D team alerted me to this recently. You've been seeing it perhaps in some of the conservative news. Russia has officially launched what is called the Shared Values Visa. Obviously, Russia is a very controversial country these days. There are people who would never want to move there. This isn't my opinion whether you should move there, but let's talk about what this Shared Values Visa is about. You make up your own mind. Here are the broader points, as full details are not yet available. Point one, the visa is intended for Westerners who want to escape so-called woke culture and the loss of traditional values in the West. So you see a lot of people in the United States, in Canada, in Australia, all over the what we call legacy brand Western countries. You're paying high tax, and they're kind of like running off of fumes, right? Hey, we did something great in 1948, and why don't you still appreciate that? And so a lot of people in those countries are saying, I don't recognize my country anymore. And they come to people like Nomad Capitalist for help. Where can I go where the policies are a bit more conservative? The schools match my values, or I can homeschool my kids without being bothered and harassed. Where can I go? The kind of place I want to live. So I'm going to come back to why I think there's actually a lot of places like that in a moment, but that's what the Shared Values Visa is about. Point two, those requesting the visa are not required to learn the Russian language or pass any kind of Russian history test. What Russia has done back when we would research it before the war is they did have some requirements for like permanent residence, for example. You would need to learn Russian. Even the golden visa in Russia has some relatively unique requirements. Oftentimes, you'll get a golden visa in Portugal, for example, or historically in Spain or other countries that would actually grant citizenship to golden visa investors, passive investors who may not move there, but they made investments. And the deal was, hey, you can move here. You don't have to learn the language, but if you want to get citizenship in the future, you should learn the language. Russia, it sometimes put this in the beginning. Hey, in order to get the residence permit, you have to speak Russian. And so this visa exempts that because ostensibly most people coming from Western countries do not speak Russian. Point three, there's a possible path to citizenship for certain immigrants. We're waiting on details of that. That's something I wouldn't want to do. You know, a lot of countries in Asia, for example, they don't really grant citizenship. They're great at granting residence permits. So you look at countries in the Gulf, for example, or countries in most of Southeast Asia. You can live there, or East Asia too. You can live there maybe forever. But they're really stingy with granting citizenship. They don't do that. Russia does grant citizenship. They had a program that was as fast as 3 years before. And it's a passport that I really don't think I'd want right now, because if you go to a lot of banks, if you go to set up a trust, if you do any number of things around the world where you're involving a Western bank or a Western trust company or a Western business, you're going to have a problem. And so I think it'll be important just to study the impact of even being a resident in a country like that, and what, if any, impact that will have on, hey, when I go to open a bank account somewhere, what if I live in Russia and I become a tax resident? That's probably not the ideal thing. So I think that one of the things you're going to have to think about if this Shared Values Visa is for you is you are making kind of a commitment. It kind of has the feeling to me of back in the 90s, my parents debated leaving the United States, and one of the places they talked about was New Zealand. And the idea was not what we talk about at Nomad Capitalist now, where you have your bank account in Singapore and you live in Malaysia, but you also spend your summers somewhere else in Europe where you have the golden visa, you're working towards citizenship, and your company's set up over here, and that's tax friendly, and your employees are over here. There wasn't really talk back in the 90s of that kind of distribution. It was just, hey, we're moving from the US and we're moving it all lock, stock, and barrel to New Zealand. And I kind of think there's going to be some elements of that for someone who goes after the Shared Values Visa, because a lot of the Western countries just aren't going to be really interested in dealing with someone who has certain ties to Russia. Now, a bank, for example, is more likely to ask about your citizenship than about your residences, but tax residence is a big question for any number of banks, brokerages, investments, setting up a company somewhere. I think that could be an issue. So you may be painting yourself into somewhat of a corner if you do this, into where, hey, there's plenty of countries that are still happy to work with Russians. Hong Kong and the UAE and most of the Gulf and South America and all that. Where's the Switzerland in there? Sure, I mean, Dubai, for example, could be a place that is a wealth hub. The other places generally don't open up, bank accounts for non-residents. Where's your company going to be based? I think that you're probably committing to cutting a lot of Western ties over the long run if you take advantage of this. And I think citizenship, were you to get it in the future, right now would be rather toxic. Step 4, the applicant of the shared values visa are excluded from the quotas, which usually limit foreign immigration to Russia. One thing I think a lot of people don't understand about Russia is that it is a rather multicultural country. There's entire parts of Russia, regions that are Muslim regions, for example. You have plenty of immigration from Central Asia, so Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, etc. And I suppose, unfortunately, like any country, a lot of people look down on those people. They look down on the poorer immigrants. But to say that Russia is an entirely Christian, entirely Caucasian country, I think ignores a lot of the details of what Russia actually is. And that speaks to some of these immigration limits which exist. Point 5 is applicants must declare that they share certain political and social views. Here's what they are: being pro-life, strong traditional moral values, prioritizing the spiritual over the material, support for the traditional family structure. So again, very controversial, but you saw, Vladimir Putin at one point saying, as long as I'm in charge, it's one man, one woman in marriage. You make up your own mind about that. And by the way, you know what it says to me? It says there's a lot more nuance to this than people want to believe. And so while the official list of countries whose citizens would be eligible, this has not been released yet, what they're looking at, what we expect is the US, Canada, the UK, most of the European Union is on that list. I'm going to let you make your own decisions on this. I mean, you've seen people like Tucker Carlson go to Russia and say, hey, this is pretty nice. You've seen articles all over the news from various sources saying, hey, Russia, their economy's growing. They've effectively gotten around a lot of the sanctions the West has put on them. That to me speaks to the so-called global South and BRICS and all that coming together, and the Western world does not have the same pull that it did before. Now, do your values say that you want to go and live in Russia? That's up to you. I'm just the messenger here. Unfortunately, we don't shoot messengers anymore. But this is something that you have seen talked about around conservative media in the United States. I saw one source say that this new decree blows the lid off the establishment's agenda, letting freedom-loving folks bypass the usual bureaucratic nonsense like language tests or history exams. It's interesting that a lot of people who are conservative in the United States want to crack down on immigration, want people to assimilate. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but here's one area where, why am I politically homeless? I'm all for helping people go where you're treated best, finding the best options, finding the places that will let you in with, indeed, the least red tape. But to say, hey, we don't want people coming to our country without taking language tests or knowing our history, but we want to go there and not know their language or know about their history, a little weird. If you're going to go somewhere, I do think knowing about the culture, knowing about the history is important. I try and do that in the places where I spend time. One source said Russia is rolling out the red carpet. The Russian news agency said Moscow will provide assistance to any foreigners who want to escape the neoliberal ideals being put forward in their countries and move to Russia, where traditional values reign supreme, according by a new decree signed by President Vladimir Putin. And they basically go on and say, hey, yeah, we're making it easy. You don't have to learn what all the other people have to learn. And so this was initially, I think, brought up by some Italian student that said, our countries are going in the wrong direction. Why don't you, Russia, do something? Now, here's why I think that the Russia piece, it's great marketing. And whether you like it or not, whether you agree with Putin or not, whether you like Russia, I don't know Putin. Okay, I don't know. I've never met Putin. But I think that they've jumped on a bandwagon, just as we've said that the legacy brand countries, where I'm from in the United States, for example, great marketing, right? Everyone sings about the California girls and the export Hollywood movies, and it's like, hey, that's the place to go. It's the name brand. It's the Coca-Cola of countries. Well, there's probably beverages out there that taste better than Coca-Cola, that are healthier for you than Coca-Cola. But people focus on Coca-Cola. You just go and instinctively grab a Coca-Cola because that's what you've been marketed to your entire life. That's the United States. That's the legacy brand countries. And so now Russia, because it's a big country and everyone knows where it is, and it's obviously been, part of geopolitics from go, people know Russia. You know what's interesting? I watch a lot of these spy shows and caper movies and caper shows. And sometimes the villains are Russians. That's like the thing people know. But sometimes they take it to the next level. They're like, They don't know where Albania is, but we'll make it sound kind of shady, Albania, right? Or Serbia. You'll see the Serbians and the Albanians. We've got a lot of Serbians and Albanians who've worked for us over the years. And that's kind of like the next level. I can tell you, President Vučić in Serbia, I would say probably agrees with almost all of this. And people in Serbia agree with this. We just filmed Live Like a King in Belgrade recently. And I was talking to some of the people there. I will tell you, the people in Belgrade probably agree with a lot of this. They want to live in a conservative, traditional values culture. And so Russia's the one that's getting the attention. Russia's the big country everyone's heard of. The average American doesn't know much, if anything, about Serbia or other countries in the Western Balkans. But I would say, hey, those countries have been open for immigration. Those countries are, in many cases, somewhat tax-friendly. And they're going to have the same kind of benefits. We've been helping clients move to Eastern Europe, not really to Russia. We've helped people move to Serbia, to Montenegro. We've done a little bit of stuff in Albania. Georgia is another country. Very traditional people. Armenia is another country. Very traditional people. I think Georgia and Armenia may be a little bit softer than some of that stuff, but the people are very traditional. Now, if you're single and you're used to a raucous dating life, you're probably not going to go to Belgrade or to Tbilisi and find that. Maybe more so in a Moscow or St. Petersburg, because you're getting true traditional values. People are more traditional in that part of the world. We've helped people go there for years. In Singapore, for example, the former prime minister was talking about woke policy and telling the Western world to ease up. One person said, in Singapore, we believe in being respectful and considerate towards others, but we also value common sense and practicality. Their advice to their American friends was to take a deep breath, relax, lighten up a bit. Life's too short to be constantly outraged about everything. So what I've told you over the last year is, if you feel the social policies in your countries are going cuckoo, it's not just Russia. It's not even the greater Eastern Europe region, which we've talked about for years and where I've spent some of my time. You can go to a lot of places in the world and they're going to have those values. I spend time in Malaysia. We host Nomad Capitalist Live in Malaysia. It's our annual event. Malaysia is a country that is predominantly Muslim. The government is generally Muslim. I happen to think they don't impose their values on you. You can wear what you want. You can basically do what you want. May not be for everybody, but that's a place where they're going to be a bit more traditional. There's going to be niches in a lot of countries that are less conservative. And as if you just want kind of this total conservative approach, then sure, Eastern Europe or the Gulf. I was recently in Qatar. I was recently in Oman. Been in the UAE, in Bahrain, even Kuwait. I've been there before. They're going to be more traditional. There's going to be parts of Latin America. Yes, they are kind of moving a bit more in the direction of the United States on some of that stuff, but there are still a certain amount of family values that you don't see in the English-speaking legacy brain countries. So there's a lot of places that you can go for this, and that plays perfectly into what we do here at Nomad Capitalist. We help people sift through all the options. Russia's coming out and they're getting their name on the leaderboard. They're going to get some people who want to go there. And again, for some people, that might be the option. I think you'll want to take a hard look at what that's going to mean for the rest of your life, given the West's perspective on Russia right now. And do you want to totally abandon the West? I'll tell you what, we get a lot of clients who come to us and they say, I'm sick of the West, it's going the wrong direction. Hey, I'm with you, brother. They don't want to give up on it. The idea of giving up U.S. citizenship or giving up another Western citizenship, which I did, they're not ready for that. And so I think that to go as far as Russia, you're going to have to make some harder decisions. Serbia, Montenegro, you're not going a bridge so far. And certainly Latin America or Asia. The point is, there's plenty of places you can go. And if you come to us and say, hey, here are my concerns specifically, we will craft a plan for you that not only helps you find a place that works for you and your family socially. People want to homeschool. Not every country allows that, but plenty do. How do you get all that done? But also, if you're going to move, you might as well lower your tax bill, because if you're talking about this stuff, you're probably somewhat successful. And so you're probably paying a lot of money to not get a lot in return in your country. You might as well reduce that while you're going through the hassle of moving. Are you going to get a second passport to be able to divorce yourself? How do you do that? These are all the things we help people with at Nomad Capitalist. Banking, moving your company. It's all under one roof. If you go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply, we will go through with you. Don't get latched on. People, I want to pay zero tax. Dubai is the only place. There's like dozens of countries you can go and pay 0%, maybe 5% tax. Dozens and dozens of dozens. I don't like woke policies. I'm going to go to Russia. Dozens and dozens of countries that would solve that problem for you. So before you jump to the name brand for a particular thing, go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply and learn how we can create a holistic plan for you that addresses all of your concerns, not just a knee-jerk reaction to one.